Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.
Hafidades Antiro, welcome to your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry. And as many of you know, Club 200, the annual fundraiser of the NMI chapter of the American Red Cross, is just around the corner. So we figured it'd be a great time to have them in and find out more about this local nonprofit. Joining us today is the Executive Director, John Hirsch. Your name is synonymous with the NMI chapter of the American Red Cross, John. Welcome.
Kathy, thank you. Flattering will get you nowhere, but I appreciate the accolades. I've been with the Red Cross now for 16 years, so people are and do associate me with what we do here and our humanitarian mission. So it's great to be here today.
Well, we wanted to really take an opportunity to learn more about what the chapter is all about. A lot of people, as we were chatting before the show, know that the Red Cross helps people, but you actually do a lot more than I realized.
Yeah, I think people, if you just talk to the average person on the street and said, hey, what about the Red Cross? What do they do? And generally the response is, well, we know they help people. And then, well, what do you mean help people? Well, I'm not really sure. Don't you do things during disaster?
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted to talk a little bit today about, kind of our 5 lines of service, and the centerpiece and really the most important part of it is disaster services. So people kind of get that right. We are there. We are kind of the nation's organization that's really responding, not just here in the Commonwealth or without the region, but throughout the nation. And our country relies on the American Red Cross to do that. We're congressionally chartered, so we have a little bit different standing. We're a nonprofit organization, but we were chartered by the United States Congress in 1905.
Does that mean they give you money?
That doesn't mean they give me money. Yeah,
okay,
we were lucky.
Yeah.
Well, the Boy Scouts were chartered by the Congress as well. But yeah, neither of us get money directly from the federal government. So we're reliant 100% on donations from our community and whether we can write a grant or get other types of financial support. But it comes from companies and individual donors primarily.
Well, that's interesting. I never knew that Congress basically started the Red Cross. Give us a little bit more about the history of this organization.
Yeah, well, I think probably the most well-known thing about the Red Cross is Clara Barton. It seems like a lot of kids did little research projects when they were in elementary school or high school about Clara Barton. But, she did found the American Red Cross in 1881, and she had gone to Europe and seen some of the horrific battles that were happening in Europe at the time in the early 1800s, and was mortified, really, that a lot of soldiers were killed or injured on the battlefield, and there was just no one there to try to retrieve them or help them recover, the ones that could be helped. And so she thought that this was terrible and unacceptable. So her and kind of her Swiss counterpart, Henry Dunant, who was the founder of the entire Red Cross movement, they started to collaborate. And then she moved back to America and she started the American Red Cross. And she was really a champion of providing disaster assistance and assistance to the military, from way back, from the early 1900s.
You mentioned her partner from Switzerland. Is their flag similar to the American Red Cross flag?
It is. The Swiss flag is actually kind of an inverse of the Red Cross flag, right? So they're red with white, and we're white with red. And part of it was that the entire Red Cross family, whether it's the American Red Cross or the French Red Cross or the Japanese or Korean Red Cross or even the Palauan Red Cross, we all have 7 guiding principles that all of us follow, whether you're in Africa or you're in the Middle East, and these are neutrality and independence and volunteerism, things like that. And so wherever you go, you're going to see a poster. Whatever Red Cross society you are in the world, you're going to see that poster with those 7 fundamental principles. And we all, kind of live by those. And I think that's one thing that's something really special about our organization, is that we service everyone and we help everyone, and we're not someone that might say, well, if you're not a U.S. citizen or you're not this group or that group, then we're not going to provide help to you. Regardless of whatever your immigration status, your ethnic background, your religion, we're always going to be out there to help you.
Let's talk a little bit more about these lines of service you mentioned.
Right. Well, like I said, the cornerstone is our disaster services, and it's kind of broken into two, what we call blue sky periods, which are when the sun is shining, and that's when we start kind of there's three legs really to the disaster program, and that's preparedness, response, and recovery. So preparedness is obviously something we want to do when there's blue skies. We don't want to be preparing people for disaster when we've gone into typhoon condition 2. People
a little bit too late.
Too late for that. Yeah. So we really want to, take the initiative and get out there in the community and teach people about all the natural disaster threats that are out there, whether it might be a typhoon that might be heading our way, it might be an earthquake risk, it might be a tsunami, it might be flooding in low-lying areas. And a lot of the things that our international group are working on right now are climate change and sea level rise and things like that don't affect us so much here in Saipan, but a lot of our other neighbors in Micronesia are impacted by sea level rise and, actual population migration, and Red Cross is very involved in a lot of communities in the Pacific, studying that and researching, what the threats are and things like that. So there's a big initiative around preparedness, and then once we move from blue skies, then we start going into the gray skies, kind of like what we had a couple nights ago at 3 o'clock in the morning.
I was just going to ask, okay, we've had a depression come through. What is it? Speaking to all of us right now, as our listeners and myself, what is it I should have had ready when that depression came through? I don't know how well my batteries are stocked. I got water, but what are some of the fundamentals that you talk about during gray skies?
Well, I mean, again, one of the things that we are just constantly pounding into, anyone who can listen is, you got to try to build some sort of preparedness kit at home, whether it's an old bucket, whether it's a tote or something, and inside you really have to have some of those emergency supplies that you might need, whether it's flashlights, fresh set of batteries, medicine, some paper products, a radio,
battery operated radios,
things like that,
becoming scarce.
Yeah, because I know for a fact, and maybe I'm guilty as charged, but at 3:30 in the morning a couple nights ago, I'm like, oh, where's my flashlight? What happened? As the power went out and the winds kicked up, and I know everyone on the island was thinking for a second there, what in the world is happening? And so it's all about, just like anything in life, as long as you do your preparedness and get comfortable that your family is aware of what the threats are, and how they need to react during a threat. So that might be a natural threat. What if, let's say, all the cell towers on the island went down? How would mom and dad and the kids communicate? There's no way to communicate. All the landlines are down, the cell lines. So does your family have a communications plan? Are they able to reach their children if there's a problem or things like that? So
wait, landlines too? Wow, that's quite a scenario. I keep a landline specifically for that purpose of there being a storm.
Well, it's very good. You've got some redundancy there, but we are in a very earthquake-prone area, and so while it's incredibly important that our telephone lines are buried under the ground, so they completely are, I don't know about completely, but pretty well protected from any sort of wind threat. But if we had a major earthquake here, then obviously that would be a whole different story with our telecommunications system. And as we know, a couple years back, there was, an unfortunate break in our fiber optic cable, which disrupted, again, our landline system. So it's always good to have a little backup. And so have those batteries, have that battery charged radio and flashlight in your kit, have some toilet paper, some medicine. They even recommend having a little extra cash in there, things like that.
All right. So after gray skies comes the actual disaster. Of course, everyone remembers what happened during Typhoon Sodalor. What types of services do you provide there?
Well, yeah, as we pull out of blue skies and move into the gray skies, that's so we started preparedness, and now we're in response. And response can really take all kinds of, shapes. It doesn't necessarily, we don't have kind of a cookie cutter way of helping people that are in need. So what we do is, as soon as we're on the ground, whether it's here, responding to Sodalore, or whether we're in the U.S. Virgin Islands responding to Maria, or we're in Florida responding to Irma, or whether we're in California responding to wildfires, you just I kind of wanted to lay out all those different disasters just to show you how different they all are, and how the logistics are all different, and how the threats are all different, and the language barriers, and all the different things that we face. So every time we respond, of course our overriding goal is to relieve human suffering. We know we want to do that, but exactly how we do it and the shape and form is going to change. So the first thing we do is we want to provide kind of emergency protective measures. So we want to get people out of harm's way. We want to get them into sheltering. We want to provide food and water to them. So that's the very, very first thing that we do. And then that kind of moves slowly and segues into providing some additional comfort items. So this might be hygiene kits, hand sanitizer, toilet paper, toothbrush, soap, things like that. Mm-hmm. And then again, as we kind of go through that progression of response, then we might be looking at providing some financial assistance, so that maybe they can use the money to buy roofing tin to repair a hole in their roof, or to provide money to replace some lost school books or shoes or clothing or things like that.
Wow.
So that's kind of the progression.
That's a wide variety.
Yeah, so it's a wide variety. And again, what those particular needs are change based on what the demographics of the community are, the severity of the impact, and what are the customs and traditions on St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. What's that culture like, and what do they like versus what do we like here in the Northern Mariana Islands? So it could be very different, and we're up against that a lot in Puerto Rico now, where of course everyone there speaks Spanish. That's really their first language, and their traditions and the way they live are very different than it is in the mainland or even here in the Northern Marianas. So how do we go about providing comfort and hope and material resources to people that maybe we don't live in that community? So we need to lean heavily on the Red Cross presence there and get guidance from the local leadership, the local government, and all of our local community partners.
Now, I know in times of disaster, a lot of people want to donate. And there are, if I'm not mistaken, there's some things that are actually better for you to receive, and maybe some things that you don't really collect. Maybe they could go to Caridad or some other agencies. Tell us a little bit about what types of assistance you welcome that you can pass on to those in need.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and it's something that comes up after every disaster, because as soon as we see something on the news, whether it's the California wildfires or the hurricanes that impacted Texas, right away we gotta empty out our closet. We want to open up our pantry and get out all of our canned foods and send those to people that need help. Well, you, along with 100 other million people, want to do that, and it's just not physically possible for organizations like the Red Cross and others to manage all of that. It takes way too much of our administrative resources to be able to do that. And I know people want to do it, and it is kind of the right thing to want to be able to help in some way, but really what the Red Cross and I think other leading non-governmental agencies, nonprofits, what they always recommend is to try to give a financial gift, and then let the Red Cross or the Salvation Army or the Southern Baptist or United Methodist group, that let them use those resources to buy the very specific things that are in need for that particular moment, because the needs are changing literally hour by hour. And we've seen over and over again where supplies of blankets and teddy bears and things like that.
That's important.
Show up on a disaster, 2 months after it happened.
Oh.
And they have piles and piles of it. And a lot of that stuff gets hidden from the public because, it's hard for people to, we had to throw away, 7,000 teddy bears that came in because there's just nothing we can do with those. So I would really encourage the community to try to, and it doesn't need to be a large donation. You can make a $10 donation or a $20 donation. The only exception would be if you know someone who lives in the impacted area. So you have an affiliated church group in that area, or you have relatives that live in that area, and you want to send stuff directly to them and know that you can count on them then to distribute those things. That might be the exception. But to kind of flood the Red Cross or other organizations with all this in-kind stuff is really, really discouraged.
I know that one of the ways nonprofits are kind of gauged is how much of their money goes to services versus administration or overhead or whatever you want to call it. And I think the Red Cross has a pretty good rating when it comes to that, doesn't it?
We do. Our leadership in Washington, D.C. likes to say that our aggregate overall kind of cost to raise $1 versus service delivery is like 91 cents to 9 cents. So of every dollar, 91 cents is going to service delivery, which is hopefully helping people directly, and then the other 9% is going to pay the electric bill and to do more, pay salaries or do whatever the administrative piece is. So I think we do actually. Charity Navigator and the Better Business Bureau give us a very high rating on that kind of thing.
And that's something that probably, people can take assurance in when they do, make that financial donation, that it's most of it, 91%, is going to actual needs of the people.
Right.
That's
and
great.
One thing, too, and just in the name of transparency, is that 91 to 9% is not like a fixed. So it's not like for the California wildfires, it will only be 91%. We, on average, when we average out year in and year out, all the responses, and we are responding to 70,000 disasters around the nation every year, small single-family fires, multifamily apartments that burn down, bigger storms like Hurricane Katrina and Sandy and Sodalor, and now recently Irma and Maria. So on average, it's 91%. So it doesn't mean that necessarily, like
every
in the Virgin
disaster,
Islands,
yeah.
the ratio could be skewed just slightly.
Well, let's take a break, and we'll be back with John Hirsch, the Executive Director of the NMI chapter of the American Red Cross.
On Wednesday, October 24th at 6 p.m. at the American Memorial Park, the Northern Marianas Humanities Council will introduce Arlene Steffi's DVD version of Itinautal Marianas, a history of the peopling of the Marianas from 1521 through 1898. Steffi, who is an ethnographer and oral historian, will present the concept, development, and implementation of the program, which contains interviews with numerous historians, archaeologists, and scholars who are knowledgeable in Marianas history. Attendees will receive a discount coupon toward the purchase of the DVD series. So join us for the launch of Itinautal Marianas on October 24th at 6 p.m. at American Memorial Park Visitor Center Theater.
Welcome back to Your Humanities Half Hour. We're learning today about the NMI chapter of the American Red Cross with John Hirsch, the Executive Director. And John, we were going down the lines of services that you guys offer. We started off with disaster, and you also wanted to mention a couple of special projects, the pillowcase, something.
Yeah, kind of during our blue sky work, which is, when we're not involved in a response, we're very active in the community, almost on a weekly basis now, with installing smoke alarms and doing a whole home fire campaign initiative. So it's called kind of Sound the Alarm. So we want to let the community know that every single home in this island should have a smoke alarm installed.
Absolutely.
They should have not only one, they should probably have two or three. They should be checking the batteries at least annually. And so we've got a great initiative, and we've gotten some support from our local emergency management and fire department. And so we're out on the weekends in the community installing smoke alarms for folks who perhaps couldn't afford one. So we're looking at trying to, of course, address the most vulnerable people in our community, people with functional access needs, disabilities, small children, people that are older. And so we're trying to target them. And then we're also doing an initiative in the public school and private schools, which called Pillowcase Project. And this is a project about learning about the different disaster threats. So it's learning about typhoons, it's learning about earthquakes, it's learning about fires, and it's basically a project that was sponsored by the Disney company. And
we love Disney.
And they provide pillowcases for us with all the Disney characters on them, and the kids color them in, and they color and put in particular items in their pillowcase that they think that they would need during a disaster.
Oh, that is so cool.
So it's been really great. We've done a lot of projects at in Cagman, at the library, public and private schools. So that's been really rewarding to see, because really a lot of these initiatives around preparedness start with our children, right? And they're the ones that tell the parents and the Manamco,
they're the ones teaching.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I see you have a little sticker on that says, "I learned how to save a life today." This is also related to some of your services.
It is.
And you actually have a young man who's sitting very quietly here in the studio. Your, shadow for the day.
My shadow for the day, Kevin Song, is in the studio.
And he's got I learned how to save a life today, too. What's this all about?
Well, what it is we again, jumping to another line of our service, which is health and safety. Not only are we, like I said, our cornerstone service is disaster. However, we're really one of the nation's leading providers of health and safety training in the country. So we provide CPR training for adults and infants. We provide first aid training. We provide automated external defibrillator training. We provide lifeguard training and swimming classes. So we've got those classes ongoing. We're using actually a third-party providers who are teaching our programs now, and it's been very successful. And one of the programs that we have is, and I really would encourage everyone in the community to do it, because you don't really need to pay for it, and you don't need a certified instructor to teach it, but it's called hands-only CPR, citizen CPR.
I took that class
hey,
with my
there you
son.
go.
It was awesome. I still remember the song. They got a song to help you remember the beat, to do the heart compression.
Staying alive, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Do you want to sing it?
No. Okay. I have laryngitis. I can't do that.
Staying alive. It's pretty fun.
But so with our kids who are the takeover kids today, who were up in our office, and we had of course Kevin, and then we had 3 or 4 other students who were helping at our other long-term recovery office, and we brought them up and we did a little mini training class today. So we all got on the ground and practiced the skills, and these guys all know how to save a life now.
Totally. What a great investment for the day. Well, there's another line of service you have, which I wasn't really familiar with, which is biomed. What is that all about?
Well, biomed really is what really kind of in layman's term is just our blood services, blood donations.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
so the Red Cross is the leading blood provider in the country. So not only are we shipping platelets and whole blood to all 50 states, it includes the territories, including Saipan and Guam. So while we don't actually take blood donations here due to all the rigorous testing that blood has to go through, when you go into the hospital, or if you ever had to go into the hospital here in Saipan and needed blood, the bag hanging next to you would say American Red Cross on it, because it was drawn from somebody in the United States and it was shipped all the way out here. So that's pretty incredible.
That is cool.
We handle about 40% of the nation's blood supply, and I think the next largest blood services company controls about 2%. So there's a lot of very small regional blood banks, like they have in Hawaii, a regional blood center, but the American Red Cross really has the lion's share of the blood supply. I think we have 3.6 million donors every year that give blood to the Red Cross. So that's a lot of units.
That does ring a bell now that you mentioned it, yes.
Yep.
And you also provide some special services to the armed forces.
We do. And again, this goes back to Clara Barton and her experience on the battlefield. So we've had a very, very long history with supporting the military. We had sent Red Cross nurses to the Korean War, to the Vietnam War. We've got Red Cross personnel, not nurses anymore, but we've got personnel now all forward deployed all around the world. So we have Red Cross staff in Afghanistan right now. We have them in Iraq. We have them in North Africa. We have them in all over Europe, in Germany and Italy, and of course in Korea and Japan at our bases there. And so our role now is really to provide emergency messaging services for the Department of the Defense. So if someone has an active duty service member, and let's say someone gets sick here at the hospital, and the service member says, "Hey, I need to come home to Saipan." Well, the commander would say, "Well, I need more than a text message. I need some sort of proof." So what happens, that proof and that verification comes from the American Red Cross. So our office in Saipan will work with the Commonwealth Health Center. We'll get a doctor's verification of what the prognosis is, what the illness is, and what is the need for the soldier to return. And then we go onto a secure DoD website and we enter all this information in. And then within 2 hours, it's delivered to that service member's command, no matter where they are in the world. So if they're out on an aircraft carrier in the Indian Ocean, or they're at Fort Sill in Oklahoma, they're going to get that message within 2 hours. And then the command will read the Red Cross message because they know now all the information has been verified. And then they'll make the decision on whether they're going to release the soldier to come back to Saipan to either attend a funeral, or if somebody, an immediate relative, is sick or ill.
Well, you mentioned at the beginning of our show that you don't receive federal funding and you're a nonprofit organization. And we do want to talk about Club 200 coming up and invite as many people as the venue can accommodate to come on out. What's it going to be like this year? And tell us the details for those that may not be familiar with it.
Yeah, well, the club, we have two signature events each year that help raise money for our local chapter here. And all the money we raise stays locally here. We use it locally to support all the programs that I just described. And one is our walkathon, which happens usually in March, which is Red Cross month, March or April. And then our dinner gala event is the Club 200, and this year is the 28th year we've done this event. So everyone who's lived here for a while certainly knows our event, but for those who've just moved onto island, it's just a big beach party, and we've got live entertainment, we've got an all-you-can-eat buffet, an open bar, we have lots of great raffle prizes, and this year our grand prize is a $15,000 prize package. So it'll be like a $10,000 gift certificate at Joe 10. So you'll be able to go into any Joe 10, whether it's Joe 10 Motors or go into Ace Hardware or the Superstore, and be able to use this certificate to purchase things at those stores. And we've got trips on Delta Airlines, and we have just all kinds of great things. So I think we're expecting people to show up. We're only 2 or 3 days ahead of Halloween. So people always, over the last 6 or 7 years, really dress up for our event, and they wear really fun costumes. So we're expecting SpongeBob to be there. We're expecting mermaids to be there, pirates to be there. We got all kinds of fun things planned.
And where can people get tickets if they're interested?
They can buy tickets up at the Red Cross office up on Airport Road. They can call 234-3459. 3459, and they can get tickets from any of the board members and from other ticket sellers that are out there in the community. So we're really excited this year. It's going to be a lot of fun. We've got a lot of people out there selling tickets, and we just would really appreciate everybody's support. Tickets are only $100 each, and we've never raised the price of our tickets. So since the very first event way back, which was actually on Managaha,
really?
That was the very first event. In fact, it was called the Club 300 back then, the very first year, because we could only sell 300 tickets because that's all we could fit on Managaha. But the tickets were still $200 per couple or $100 per person. So here, 28 years later, we're still at $100. So I don't think anybody who comes to the event is ever disappointed. It's just a lot of fun, and it's casual and very relaxing. And of course, ultimately, it's a way in which they can support the Red Cross and our mission here.
Well, I've learned so much today about the local chapter and the Red Cross in general. Any final thoughts before we go?
No, I mean, just the final thing would be that, with the one kind of, again, unique thing about our organization is that we're volunteer-led. So 98% of everybody who's involved with Red Cross is a volunteer. So all of our board members, all the people who respond to disasters, every one of them is a volunteer. So these are folks that are giving up their family time, giving up time with their kids maybe, and helping people that they don't even potentially know. And that's a big sacrifice. So I'm always humbled by everybody who's involved with the Red Cross and their belief in the great work that we're doing. So thank you to all the volunteers out there that make it happen.
Our guest today has been Executive Director John Hirsch of the NMI chapter of the American Red Cross. John, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
This has been Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
This program was supported by a We the People grant awarded to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.